confusion as a teacher is my second favorite emotion. And for this one, I'm going to share it a little differently than the last one. I'm going to try to start with some stories and build up your kind of intuition for what this emotion could actually, what the little nice one-liner for the emotion could be. So the first story is that I once got in trouble with my students because I had a guest speaker who was very good at emotions. They were a neuroscientist, they were a consultant who goes and helps executives, figure out why they need to be more open about emotions in their companies. And so I asked my guest speaker, how do I make people confused? And immediately in the chat, every one of my students was saying, hello, teacher, why? Why would you ever want to do this? That sounds awful. Don't do this to us, please. They were very confused why I want to know how to make people confused. Teachers are supposed to make sense. A different story, it's kind of common wisdom, or like a phrase I've heard in my life, which is, if you have a question, there's probably other people in class who have that question too. And then I've tend to find with like common phrases or things that people repeat all the time, buzz phrases, buzzwords, that sort of stuff, they tend to be half right. They're right in some situations, but not all. So my working understanding of this one is that it's not quite right. If you've ever had someone in a class ask a question, which is exactly like what gave you the answer you needed, you probably would notice that you didn't actually have a question, right? You felt confused, but you didn't have a question yet. And yet, when the other person said the answer, the confusion went away. So in other words, you didn't have the words to explain the feeling. The feeling was there before the words. In my mind, the whole version, like if you add the second sentence, it's basically, if you have a question, there's probably other people in class who need that answer too, because they have the same confusion or the same misunderstanding. But only some people in class actually end up getting to that question, end up finding the words to explain it. So why is that? So let's pull these stories together and give you a toy example, one where you can kind of viscerally see what confusion might be. So as far as I can tell, confusion is where you believe one thing, totally fine, it's great, and then you go learn something else, but you realize these two things can't both be true at the same time. For the coders out there, it's basically a compiler error, but you can see this in action. I'm going to make you confused, okay? I'm doing the forbidden ritual. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. What color is water in a glass? What color is water in the ocean? So we got clear and we got blue. Why is that? Well, it turns out water in the ocean isn't actually blue. It's reflective. But you may have noticed a little bit of confusion where, two of your beliefs are a little bit in conflict. And you'll actually find that most paradoxes, if it's called that, paradox is a name for a little story that exposes a conflict in your beliefs. They make you feel confused. So the reason I ended up going back to the original story, the reason I asked my students, I wanted to figure out how to make people confused, is I wanted my students to ask questions. You may notice that in calls, I just did it a second ago, one of the almost only forms of engagement most lecturers will have is questions from the audience, right? And yet, most people don't end up having questions. So if they don't have questions, some presenters think, well, I did a great job. They got everything I gave them. When in practice, it's nope. Some of them are so lost, they don't even know what the heck is going on. Some of them are, they understood. They don't know why it matters, but they think they understood what you were trying to say. And then, a whole bunch of people, are generally okay. But you don't actually get the kind of feedback that you want. You want people who are lost or people who don't understand why this all matters to be able to give you that feedback in the moment. So you'll also notice, so with this theory, it basically says that in order to feel confused, you need two beliefs. You can't just have, something that is confusing on its own. It has to be in conflict with something else. So I think that to me is why my understanding of why smart kids ask questions in class. They're the ones who almost seem like they could teach the course themselves. Because when the teacher says something, it very quickly will conflict with a strong belief the student already has. And so they're more likely to feel confused instead of when you only have one belief, the words that people use to describe that is not confused, it's lost. I feel like I don't know what's happening. I feel like I don't understand. I feel like I'm falling behind. They don't describe themselves as confused, even though it's the same misunderstanding that's happening, or very similar. Another example of this is have you ever been in a meeting where you learned nothing, and yet when they asked any questions at the end, you didn't feel confused at all? Probably what happened was that you didn't expect anything from the meeting. There was nothing in conflict because anything you got was exactly what you were going to get. There were no expectations. Yet another example where this matters is new hires or people who are new to a new space. If you're playing a new board game, for example, people just kind of look quizzically at the board like, huh, is this right? Like I don't know what's happening, but this, okay, sure, why not? So if you takeaway of here is like if you ever see someone who's new, instead of asking them to come to you when they have any questions, occasionally check in with them and just get them to describe what they're doing and why, and you will find that they are very, very lost, but not confused. The reason confusion is one of my favorites is because it's almost a sure sign that you can learn something. You're either wrong about the original belief, wrong about the second belief, or wrong about how they connect together, and very often you're wrong about it all. So how do you make yourself confused, even if you're a newbie? The first technique is to anchor theories to experiences. So here I'm saying, you'll notice those quote unquote toy examples I'm giving you. The reason for those is so that you can viscerally test these ideas I'm giving you against things that you understand far better than what I'm saying. So you have a much better sense of your internal sense of what you're feeling. You have a very strong sense of the stories in your life, the people you've met. So if I give you a theory like, worry is a feeling of consequences, your goal should basically be to find an example in your life when you felt worried, so that you can see if that follows the pattern or if it's different. The next is that when you're confused, try to pause even if you don't have a question, because the feeling will come before the question. One trick to kind of figure out what the question is try summarizing what you learned up to that point. Once you say the confusing thing, you will feel like the confusion will change. You will actually if the teacher were to repeat everything they said, you would feel the moment they said the confusing thing. So that can be a useful way to kind of narrow in on exactly what is a conflicting belief. And the last one is use the knowledge. If you teach, it's a great way to test what you're thinking and actually be able to learn where the gaps in your knowledge are. Because you'll start teaching people, and you're oftentimes you're able to tell that if the other person is getting confused, that's a sign that you're confused as well. Like your beliefs are in conflict. So you can kind of use them as an external confusion module or like a compiler.